Tracy Denise Gamsky was born on August 28, 1970, in Omaha, a city with over 486,000 inhabitants located in the state of Nebraska, United States. She was the only child of John and Mary. Tracy had a normal childhood, and according to sources, her parents separated when she was about 10 years old. Sometime later, John, Tracy's father, remarried a woman named Patty. It is said that Patty and Tracy got along very well. Tracy was described by her family and friends as a friendly person who loved animals. If someone passed by her while walking a dog, Tracy would stop to pet the animal. She was that kind of person. As an adult, Tracy met a man named Stanley Tribble. Later, they got married in July 2003, and Tracy became Tracy Tribble. The couple lived in a house in the suburbs and had a pet dog. According to sources, from the beginning, their marriage was not healthy. They were constantly fighting with each other, and their relationship was tense. A few months into their marriage, the police were called to the couple's home to handle a domestic violence incident. Stanley had tried to strangle Tracy, and as a result, he was arrested and spent a few days in jail. However, Tracy later withdrew the complaint, and Stanley was released. The couple's life remained turbulent. Arguments and disputes were frequent. At the time, Stanley worked as a car salesman at a dealership, and Tracy worked at a travel company. Tracy had only recently started that job. Previously, she had worked at another place but held the same position as in her current job. The house the couple lived in was rented and belonged to a man named Chris Bryson, who was their friend. According to people who knew the couple, they both used to drink a lot, and that only worsened things between them. In most of their fights, they were drunk and would scream at each other. The arguments were so loud that all the neighbors could hear them, and the most annoyed would call the police. It is said that the couple wasn't evicted from the rented house because the landlord was their friend. Thus, Tracy and Stanley's troubled relationship was no secret to anyone. Family and friends knew they fought a lot, but even so, despite seeming to not tolerate each other, they stayed together. On May 1, 2006, the couple was having a huge argument at home, and the property owner, Chris Bryson, was called to the scene. It is unclear whether Chris was called by a neighbor or if Tracy or Stanley called him, but what is known is that when Chris arrived at the house, he found himself in the middle of yet another one of the couple's fights. At one point, Tracy threw a phone at Stanley's face. With one of them being in one room and the other in another room, Chris tried to calm the situation, and Tracy called her husband's sister, with whom she had a certain friendship. Stanley's sister went to the couple's house and also tried to calm things down. They then agreed that Tracy would sleep at her sister-in-law's house that night. The next day, Tracy returned home, but she and Stanley weren't speaking to each other, and each of them slept in a separate room. In the following days, Tracy talked about the argument with several people in her personal circle. One of Tracy's friends who heard about the argument told her that it would be better not to stay in the same house with her husband, as something worse could happen. So, on May 3, 2006, Tracy arranged with this friend, named Melissa, that she would go to her house before work to chat and do their nails. However, when May 3 came and the scheduled time arrived, Tracy didn't show up. Melissa tried calling her friend several times and also sent messages, but Tracy didn't respond. Tracy also didn't show up for work. That evening, Stanley came home after work and called his sister, with whom Tracy had a certain friendship. Stanley told his sister that Tracy still hadn't come home and that the previous night had been horrible because Tracy had drunk a lot and was out of control. He said that his wife wanted to start a fight with him, was speaking loudly all the time, and wouldn't let him sleep. Stanley explained that when he woke up before going to work, he saw that Tracy was still at home, so he left for work. However, when he came back home, he realized Tracy hadn't returned. He thought maybe she had gone to sleep at a friend's house, but her car was in the garage, as were all the things she usually took when she stayed somewhere else. Tracy's wallet, purse, and house key were all on the kitchen counter, which didn't make sense because she would never leave without these items. Later, the Animal Protection Service called the couple's house. Stanley answered the call and learned that the family's dog had been found wandering without a leash on a street in the neighborhood. He thought that was very strange because Tracy would never leave the family dog alone in the street. After that, Stanley called Tracy's family and friends to see if anyone knew where she was or had spoken to or seen her. Everyone Stanley spoke to said they didn't know where Tracy could be. Only Melissa, the friend Tracy had arranged to meet before work to chat and do their nails, said she had spoken to Tracy but that she hadn't shown up at her house as planned. Stanley also spoke to Tracy's co-workers, who said she hadn't gone to work that day. After these calls, Stanley decided to contact the authorities to report what had happened. A police team quickly arrived at his house. The officers gathered all the information they could. Stanley told them that he and his wife had fought in the previous days and also the night before. Stanley reported that about a year earlier, in 2005, Tracy had seemed very sad and discouraged with life. He said that because of this, Tracy had thoughts of taking her own life and was even admitted to a psychiatric clinic to prevent the worst from happening. Stanley stated that after Tracy had improved, she was released from the clinic, and everything seemed to go back to normal. However, they fought a lot, and in recent months, Tracy had been drinking heavily, which made their relationship even worse. Stanley told the police that he was very afraid Tracy might have done something bad to herself. Both the police and Tracy's family noticed that Stanley spoke about the events with little emotion, as if he didn't truly care. Stanley's friends thought this was because he was tired of the turbulent relationship. Moreover, it wasn't the first time Tracy had disappeared and returned a few days later. The difference was that the last time Tracy did this, she took her car and some belongings. On May 4th, detectives from the Missing Persons Unit went to Stanley's workplace to speak with him. When they arrived, the detectives asked Stanley if there was a more private room where they could talk discreetly. Stanley worked at a car dealership, and the place was quite busy, but he said they could talk right there in the middle of the showroom and in front of everyone, as he saw no problem with it. The detectives found that strange but proceeded to talk to Stanley there. Throughout the conversation, Stanley remained calm and very cooperative. He allowed the detectives to search his car, his house, and some personal items, but nothing unusual was found. Stanley didn't have any scratches on his body or any other type of injury or bruise that could indicate he had recently been involved in a fight with someone defending themselves. As you may know, when an aggressor attacks their victim, the victim tends to fight for survival, leaving marks on the aggressor such as scratches, bites, or small bruises. The investigation was still in its early stages, so the detectives did not rule Stanley out as a potential suspect. However, due to his cooperation and the lack of any evidence linking him to his wife's disappearance at that point, they considered the possibility that Stanley might not be involved in the case. In the following days, the police continued their investigation and conducted searches to try to find Tracy. Family members, friends, and even Stanley joined these searches to increase the chances of finding her. Some of Tracy's family members, who lived in another state, came to Nebraska to help. They made some flyers with pictures and information about Tracy and spread them throughout the area. When the media began reporting Tracy's disappearance, many people who had not yet heard of the case became aware, and several volunteers showed up to help with the search. The community was very anxious, as months earlier, a 12-year-old girl named Amber Harris had also disappeared. Amber went missing at a school bus stop in Omaha. A large search was conducted for her, but by the time Tracy disappeared, Amber had not yet been found. The search for Amber ended 6 months after her disappearance. The girl's remains were found in a park in Omaha. Later, a man named Roy Ellis Jr. was arrested and charged with the crime. Amber's backpack was found near his house, containing her DNA. Roy Ellis Jr. had committed several other crimes before Amber became his victim. He is currently on death row awaiting his execution. A few days later, on May 10th, another woman named Jessica O'Grady, 19 years old, also disappeared in Omaha. Jessica vanished after driving to the house of a co-worker with whom she had recently started a relationship. That co-worker was Christopher Edwards, and Jessica went to see him to tell him she was pregnant. After that, Jessica disappeared and was never seen again. Although Jessica's case has since been solved, with Christopher in prison, her body was never found. At the time, as these cases had not yet been solved, the community was terrified, as rumors that a serial killer was responsible for all these disappearances began to spread. Authorities limited themselves to saying whether the cases were connected or not and simply continued their investigations. Tracy's family even offered a $70,000 reward for anyone with information that could lead to her whereabouts. An ex-boyfriend of Tracy also helped with the search. He even went to see a medium, who told him that Tracy was alive, as she had felt her energy. Tracy's father gave a statement saying that he had spoken to his daughter 2 days before she disappeared. In that conversation, Tracy supposedly said she was happy with her new job and was making some plans for her life. Tracy's father also said that he was suspicious of Stanley, his daughter's husband. According to him, Stanley didn't seem very concerned, as if he didn't truly care, and that he should undergo a polygraph test, commonly known as a lie detector test. On May 19, 2006, a female body was found in the Mississippi River. The body was unclothed and had several visible injuries all over it, indicating that while alive, the woman had been severely beaten. As soon as the body was found, authorities speculated that it could belong to Tracy or Jessica. Later, the body was identified as Tracy Tribble, and it was found 5 miles from her home. When Stanley was informed about his wife's body, he remained calm and showed no reaction, not even asking any questions. During the autopsy, it was determined that Tracy had been beaten with a blunt object, possibly a baseball bat or a metal bar. She had injuries to her forehead and face, multiple skull fractures, a broken jaw, and some missing teeth. Her face had been almost crushed from the force of the attack. Additionally, there were several injuries all over her body, and many of her bones were broken. A toxicology analysis revealed that on the day she was killed, Tracy had consumed a significant amount of alcohol and was likely very drunk. This suggested that Tracy had no chance of defending herself. The cause of death was initially determined as multiple fractures and internal bleeding. However, the medical examiner stated that Tracy may have also been strangled, though this could not be conclusively determined due to the body's advanced state of decomposition. The medical examiner also expressed shock at the brutality of the attack, stating that Tracy's injuries were consistent with those from a hit-and-run or a fall from a significant height. He mentioned that whoever committed the crime was someone who had a lot of anger toward Tracy and that it was likely the attacker was someone close to her who knew her well. The autopsy report and statements from the medical examiner eliminated any possibility that Tracy had taken her own life. This theory had emerged early in the investigation, particularly after the detective spoke with Stanley, considering that Tracy had previously been admitted to a psychiatric clinic for suicidal tendencies. However, the injuries on Tracy's body made it clear that it would have been impossible for her to inflict such wounds on herself, especially given her state of intoxication. It was evident that Tracy Tribble had been the victim of a violent crime. Except for Stanley, the rest of the family was devastated when they learned the truth about what had happened to Tracy. Tracy's funeral took place on May 31, 2006, at the Evergreen Memorial Park Cemetery in Omaha. The farewell ceremony was attended by many, including family, friends, and co-workers. While family and friends mourned Tracy, the police continued their investigation. In August 2006, Stanley Tribble was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife.